Right. So today we're going to get started on week number 5. We'll be talking about Restful Web Services. We just spent the last couple of weeks talking about React. We're going to keep using React for the next couple of weeks. Keep using Redux. Keep using adding new features to the faculty side of the application. But now we're going to be using the RESTful Web Services to be able to store some of the data that we have been, for now, hard coding on the client. Right now, any changes that you have been making dynamically on the client are lost, right? They're not being stored anywhere, right? If you added new courses or added new widgets, or if you refresh the browser, all that was gone. So we need a place to store it, and the only place that it could possibly store it you could use local storage. The browsers, the new version of JavaScript of browsers allow you to store JSON objects or plain old strings on the local browser, and then load it again at some point later on. But that would only be stored in the local browser, right? There wouldn't be one central place where it could then be used from anywhere in the world. So instead, what we're going to try to do is send all this data over to the server, store it in the server. Eventually, the server will store it in the database. For not now. We'll wait for that for next week. For this week, we're gonna learn how to interact with a server, send data, retrieve data, following a particular architectural style of programming called Restful Services. So that's this week. Next week, we're going to go a little step further and say, okay, well, now that we've made it, that we have data on the server, let's actually make it permanent storage in a database. The data that we're going to be storing in the server will live there as long as the server is up and running. But if you reboot the server, any changes that you would have made on the server would be lost. Right? So it would only be stored within the current session of the server that is currently running. Right? Next week we'll add storage in the database. Right. Any questions before we get started? So you should also be working on your project, right? Have created teams. You should be considering a particular API that you might have identified, either some topic that interests you, and start becoming familiar with that API. You probably need to apply for a unique identifier or a key to use the API, and you'll need to start becoming familiar with the documentation of that API. What data does it give you, and make sure that it meets the requirements of the project. You really need 2 basic types of queries. One, be able to retrieve some collection of data that meets a particular criteria. Right? So that you presumably in the front end you'll have some search page where you can provide the criteria and send it over to the server, and the server would then respond with a subset of its data set that meets your criteria, whatever that domain is. It doesn't matter if it's foods or team sports, if it's music, if it's movies. It's up to you, whatever domain you prefer. And so that's one of the RESTful queries that you need to be able to do to this REST service. The second one is once I have a collection of items, I want to know more about one particular item, right? Where you go back to the server and say, well, give me more details about this specific item. And presumably you would get a much more expanded version of that particular record. The original query might have some minor fields, right? Might have maybe some kind of title, maybe a thumbnail, maybe a short description, 3-4 fields. Usually, when you go back for more details on a particular item, it'll come back with tons of other information that you can use. Right? And so that's one of the main features and requirements of the project, is that you integrate around this API, and you should start thinking about creating a prototype of you being able to query this this service, right, and be able to display some kind of list of results, right, and then being able to select one particular item and go fetch the results of that particular item, display maybe in a separate window, right, where you show this the details. So again, that's one of the main features of the project, and around that, right, build an application that would allow you to maybe bookmark a particular item, right, or maybe review that item, right, and add some meta information about that item, your particular review, read somebody else's review of that particular item, right, whatever it is. So I would first focus on identifying the API and make sure that I can have at least those two types of queries. Ideally, the result set of the first query would come back with objects that have unique identifiers that you can then use those unique identifiers to go and fetch the same item but more details about that particular item, right? So I would focus on making sure that whatever API you're thinking of at least have those two use cases, which I imagine they most do. All right? Any questions? So I'd like to have the project of what is it you're going to be working settled by the end of next week, right? So we'll create a just for you to post a Google Doc on just a brief description of what is it you're working, what are the main use cases that you think you're going to be implementing. It doesn't have to be very extensive, and you can certainly change your mind as you go. But the earlier you settle on something, the more successful you'll be. So I'm trying to bring that as early as possible and not leave it to the end. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Did you get a new microphone?
I did not. So I'm stuck back here.
Okay. No, I'm just. Are you recording?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
I am.
I'm just really reliant on the recording.